Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video we're going to take a look at one of my all-time favourite things in Warhammer, Skaven. Let's paint. So I'm sure we've all got those miniatures ranges within the Warhammer setting that just hit different, that were significant or special or something to do with our hobby history. And for me, alongside Dark Angels and Chaos stuff, it is Skaven. They were my first ever completely finished model. I remember I went along to Games Workshop Dudley back in the 90s, and I sat and had a painting lesson, and they showed me how to paint Skaven, and I painted my whole Skaven Blood Bowl team. Managed to dig out a really old photo when I sold it from years ago, so sorry it's dreadful. But it's kind of fun to see, you know. I wish I still had them. I don't have any of those minis from when I was a kid that a lot of people sort of have held on to. But yeah, ever since then, I've just kind of, I don't know what it is. They have a very special spot for me. And a few years ago, I mean, we did a Culture Paint special on them, talking about how they've changed over the years. Yeah, they've had some of the most renowned sculptors work on them as a range, and a few years ago, I was going to do them as an army for Age of Sigmar. I had tons of them. I probably own all the Skaven models from the first generation, and then the Island of Blood, and so on and so forth. I just don't have a lot of that 6th edition stuff when I was out of the hobby. But I was going to paint for Age of Sigmar, and then we got this announcement that the Old World was coming. So I'm sorry if this is a little bit of a oversharing personal video, this one, but that's just what it is. I love these little rats, and I was all going to do this, and then the Old World announcement came, and I thought, you know what, no, I'm gonna do them for Old World. So I boxed them all up, put them in the loft, and we're done. And then the years and years and years went by, and finally we were going to get the Old World, and it was revealed that the Skaven were effectively not going to be in the current storyline and the rest of it, and for whatever reason. And yeah, so it kind of bummed me out a little bit. But then we started hearing that they were going to be in the New Age of Sigmar launch box. The rumors were going around. I was like, okay, cool. And we'd seen these little warbands coming out for things like Underworlds. And they were another leap forward in that Skaven design. So it was pretty exciting. So fast forward to today, Games Workshop has sent us through the Skaventide box set to paint up or to review, and the first thing I wanted to have a play with was the rats, and I was just so unsure about where to go with it. Or was this the time I do my Skaven army? I don't know. And I thought, well, let's just paint up and have a look how the classic Clanrats have changed throughout my time in the hobby. So we've got my metal ones from the 90s. As you see here, I have several bags of these. This is my bag of spares, so I thought I'd dig a couple ones out, and we'll paint some of them, some of the Island of Blood era, and some of the new era, and just take a look at how they've changed and where that really sits in. If you're a Skaven collector now, for depending which system it is, what's it going to be like doing these Clanrats? So I thought a nice, simple army painting scheme. Let's see how we get on. So dug out the bag. As I say, it's got some of the really ancient old metal models in it. And these are my spare ones, and I found one I painted years ago with stripy trousers and stuff. So I was like, oh, this is so much fun. So I grabbed my this is Wardle varnish, it's known as, and dipped it in, cleaned it up, give them a good scrub. Now, if you're going to work on really old metal miniatures, you're going to pick them up and they have been painted. You're going to need to do a fair bit of work to get them cleaned up to a really good painting standard place to paint them from. I sort of rushed this one a bit. But things like biostrip, meths, isopropyl, things like they're all useful, and then just pick out the bits. But the problem is, if you don't pick out these deep bits that have gone in all the crevices, the detail is of the era. So it's there, but there's not tons of it. And if some of it's filled in with paint and stuff already, you're kind of losing out on it. So it's worth being a bit more fastidious than I am in this video. But as I said, this was just get them done quick and paint up and have a think and see what I'm going to do over the next few weeks for Skaven to really sort of celebrate them. So once everything was prepped, I gave them a simple, quite harsh zenithal highlight. I'm using Ivory here. I wanted to use an off-white, like a warmer sort of off-white, keep it more sort of organic. So I'm just spraying them sort of top down, 45 degrees down with one of our airbrushes. And whenever I'm airbrushing, I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck Infinity, spraying about 25 PSI. And it's a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in our Signature Series one. So I'm doing, as I said, the old lead ones. I'm going to do the Iron of the Blood era, and I'm going to do the new ones and just see where we sit with these little rats. And the reason I did the pre-shade was just to kind of get an idea of the miniature. What does it look like? But also I decided I wanted to airbrush the skin because it's a light colour. It can be tedious to do with a brush, especially if you mess it up and you need to go back and stuff. But it's very, very quick and simple to do with an airbrush. I thought, great, army painting. What's the bit that the airbrush is going to help me with? It's going to change between the models you work on. But I felt for the Skaven and how I was going to paint them, I was like, do you know what? The skin is where it will save me the time and let me paint the sort of the other fun stuff quicker. So I did a 50-50 mix of Cadian Flesh tone and Baneblade Brown. So I just wanted a kind of Caucasian skin tone on the rats, the rat men, but also just not quite so pink as the as Cadian comes out as. And then from below, I just spray it with Bugman's Glow. And then Bugman's Glow again, I just paint the tail in with that because you've got to have a little pink tail on your rats, haven't you? And I had thinned this with a little bit of acrylic medium. You could use something like Lamia medium, and it just sort of kind of makes it a bit more like a wash. Now the fur, this is where I started to first notice the changes, I guess, between these models. And this early 90s Skaven, might even be late 80s, this one, Jez Goodwin Skaven, there's a lot of fur on it. They're kind of just like little mouse, warriors, really, more so than rats. There's a range actually at the minute called Burrows and Badgers. It's a wonderful little anthropomorphic sort of skirmish game, and they're very reminiscent of this sort of style of Skaven. But there's a lot more fur on the old Skaven than there is on the new ones, and it sort of progressively lessens. And it's interesting. I don't know if it's a design choice. I've been trying to keep up to date with the articles on Warcom to do with sort of I love the interviews they do with the designers in these. I can't recall if they said anything about the decision to do less fur, but it's definitely noticeable. So cloth, fur, all the rest of it, this is all going to be brush painting now. And because again, this wasn't really to do anything than a very simple army painting scheme on, I thought contrast, that there's such a brilliant time saver for things like this, and particularly I find on more organic shapes, so less so than say armor, they're just wonderful to get you going with the scheme. And this isn't a sketch as such, but this is just I just wanted to colour these models in, really. Colour them in, get an idea, let my mind sort of wander with what I could do. And I wanted to keep the colours, say, quite nice and warm, sort of a bit more old traditional fantasy, I guess. I did not necessarily intend for these to come out looking like they worked for McDonald's, but that may have occurred. But Nazdreg Yellow is one of my absolute favourite contrast yellows to use. I like all the contrast yellows, to be honest with you. Could definitely recommend picking them up. I use them, very, very frequently. Usually through my airbrush, to be fair. But I use that and Blood Angels Red as the colours on the cloth, just simple coats. And I just wanted to take a sec to say thank you ever so much to those of you that support us over on Patreon. If you would like to get an extra video each week, normally by Andy, where he focuses in on perhaps more specific techniques and higher end display focused miniatures, that recently he's been doing some wonderful work on some larger scale stuff, including some of our Dareguard miniatures, then go and check it out. And we hugely appreciate that support. It's allowing us to do everything that we're doing. If you can't support us over on Patreon for whatever reason, then your likes, subscribes, comments on here make a massive difference as well. So thank you for that. And then it was time to sort of paint in the extra bits and bobs. And the style of this hasn't really changed. They've got the similar details. They've got their little pouches, they've got their little belts, a bit of chainmail, lots of wood. So it was lovely to see the consistency of that design has run through the 30, nearly 40 years of these miniatures. But inevitably, the detail is crisper, or more crisp on the modern miniatures. But this was one of the stages where I found that actually the newer miniatures became more tricky to paint than the old miniatures, because you've got these wonderful poses, but you also they aren't on that sort of single plane. So you've got areas that could be quite tricky to get to. And if I had glued the new Skaven onto the base, I think that would have been a real issue getting in and sort of up under the arms, in the chest and the waist area to get to the different details. And because they're modern sculpts, the detail is there and it's well sculpted and it's well rendered. So you kind of have to paint it. So that became a little bit challenging. So that's probably going to add maybe 10 minutes per rat when you're painting it, which over an army is really going to rack up. For the metals, I took an opportunity here to play around with a dry brush paint I've been using for a few months now by MIG. And I thought, I wonder if I thin it down, I can use it more like just a normal sort of base paint. And I thinned it down just with water and it went incredibly matte, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know why. I might look into it a bit more in the future, but it's always fun to learn. Whatever you're doing, right, it's always fun. There's usually something that you will learn when you're doing it, even if you're not pushing yourself, at all like that. So all the details, if you can see, very, very simple. We've just sort of base coated, maybe done one highlight on them or whatever. And I'm just going to use a unifying oil wash to tie everything together, shade everything down a little bit, just make it a bit grungy and grimy and sort of to my tastes, I guess. And here I've used Shadow Brown by Abteilung 502. I've just mixed it with normal mineral spirits. And it's a fairly thick wash, as you can see. And I'm just going to apply it in one layer. I'm trying to take my brush off when it's in a recess, and if I see it pooling in any areas, I'll try and move it around a little. And then I've just left it to dry. And I think I left it to dry for about an hour. And it's quite warm weather over here in the UK. And that was absolutely fine to then go and paint straight over. But if you're at all concerned, you could always pop a varnish over it and then paint over it. But as long as your oil paint is dry, you can then paint over it with acrylic. And equally, I haven't varnished before putting the oil paint on because I don't need to. The acrylic paint is dry, so there's not going to be any issues with it sort of interacting with any of that acrylic paint that you've put down. I've painted this little chap multiple times, and I think I'll paint him again. I painted him for a Frostgrave Warband when that game came out. I used some on my old Skaven, and I don't know what it is. There's something about that era of Skaven that just brings a lot of joy and sort of relaxation. And then I dug out some enamels. I haven't used them for ages. I thought, how can I do super quick wood? So it was just Snakebite Leather over the light coloured pre-shade. That was another nice thing about doing the skin. Because it was so light, any overspray really didn't matter because you just, whatever colours you put over the top would be powerful enough to sort of mask it. And I used Slimy Grime Dark here. It's an enamel paint. If you want to go and check out my Rotten Wood video I did quite a few years ago, I think it's one of the best videos I've done, to be honest with you. I loved doing it. Like, it may not be put together as well, but I think the what we achieved in it was really cool. And I plan to go back and use that recipe quite a lot in some upcoming projects. So once the enamels and the oils were dry, I could go in and do the finishing touches. Now, I don't love the finish that contrast gives you. I don't particularly love the look of it, if I'm brutally honest with you. So I wanted to go in and just sort of make it look a little bit more painted rather than just coloured in. So here I've mixed in a little ivory. The ivory, if you remember, is what I used on the pre-shade, and I've just mixed that into all the colours to create a highlight with. So I've mixed it into the red, and then I'm just doing lots of sort of dashes or cross-hatching or whatever. And it adds a little bit of texture, a little bit of highlighting, just more information on that painted surface to hopefully make it look less like a simply sort of coloured in plastic toy, and to just make it look a little bit more interesting, a little bit more painted. And then the same for the yellow. And it was kind of at this point, particularly when I started doing the skin as well, I realised I wasn't enjoying myself. And that seemed odd, considering how much I love Skaven models and for how many years I have wanted to do a Skaven army. And I started to think, so why is this the case? And I think the new Skaven models are undoubtedly the best they have ever done. They have all the charm of the early sort of 90s, 80s, 90s Skaven that I loved painting so much. They've got so much character in them individual. And they're very paintable. The detail's nice and crisp. There's not that much on them. So it's quite easy to break down the parts that are on the model. But they're amazing. And because I like them so much, I wasn't enjoying painting them quickly. I think I want to slow paint these Skaven. It's as simple as that, really. Like, army painting is a great thing, but I think I am coming to discover that for me, if I want to army paint something, I almost have to do it in a stylized way if I want it to be done relatively quickly. I won't call it speed paint because that winds people up. But for me, if I want something painted for an army and I need it done quickly, I would rather not paint it just less well than I can. I would rather do it in a very stylized way. So, for instance, the fleshy quartz that I did back at Christmas time, I absolutely love them. They're going to be my army to play the new edition of AOS with. They have tons of character. They're wonderful sculpts. They're very quick to paint, but because I've done them in a fairly stylized way, so I don't feel that I've just half-arsed them, you know? Whereas I was feeling with these rats, I was like, well, you're just half-arsing these. Like, I could spend 4 times as long on these models to get them where I want to get them. So it's really left me in a little bit of a quandary of what to do for content, really, for you guys with them. But they look all together in a funny way. I think they still look pretty decent, all these different eras of rats together in an army. But I think for me, if I was going to paint an army of Skaven, particularly an old world army, I think I'd be going for that Island of Blood era. I think they have the right mix of modern enough sort of sculpts and detail, but they're also the posing is obviously very similar. So you know, if you're batch painting them and the rest of it, I think you would have a more success using them from that era. I think if you want Skaven to be your army for AOS and you're willing to spend a long time just enjoying them, I think they will be incredibly rewarding. I mean, if these models are anything to go by in this box, I can't wait to see what else is coming out. So yeah, a little bit of a personal reflection video. I'm not sure. I just kind of wanted to share it with you guys, if I'm honest. I really enjoy the community we've got going here over on the Discord and stuff, and I value your opinions. And therefore I want to, when I'm excited about things, I do want to share it. So rather than just not put a video out whilst I was thinking, I thought, okay, let's film my thought processes and stuff with it. And I guess this is it. I'm not going to do a Skaven army. I've thought for the last 4 or 5 years I was going to do them. I love these models. I think they are amazing and I'm going to paint them, but I'm not going to do an army. Perhaps something a little bit smaller. But let me know what you think about that idea. So thanks for all your support. Take care. I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com and maybe Ben can sort you out.